Brian, welcome to the podcast. I'm really excited to talk to you today, and thank you for making the time.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on here, Elena.
So, give our audience a little bit of context about kind of who you are, what are you doing today, and what is your snapshot career story?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I'm Brian Aquart. I work in healthcare here out in New York, and also I'm the creator and host of a podcast called Why I Left, where I've been exploring, the Great Resignation, if you will, and why people have left their jobs during the pandemic. So I've often found myself from a career standpoint in a lot of different spaces. So I'll give you a quick background on that. So I'm an employment attorney by trade. I've bounced around a lot, if you will. I was part of I like to call it the forgotten class, if you will. So I'm a graduate 2009 law school grad, and the market crashed in '08. And so after that happened, I'm originally from Michigan, and it was terrible there. And so I left, came to New York, didn't have a job, nothing like that, and really just, as I like to call it, took the scenic route to get to where I'm at today. So I've done things from, I was an extra on People's Court for a while. I was working in the bankruptcy court. I was volunteering at other places, also in other state division courts, and eventually found my footing in the employment arena at a firm in Jersey. Worked there for a little bit, and then moved into two city government jobs where I was primarily doing investigations into harassment, retaliation, reasonable accommodations, discrimination, all of those things. And I did that for many years prior to transitioning into the HR space, where I then became a business partner, really supporting strategies moving for, like, having organizations as well as leaders and departments and teams being able to successfully move forward. And then now I've kind of pivoted into this strategy type of role of late. So that's a quick snapshot of what I've been doing, what I'm doing now. But it's been a lot of fun. There were some bumps along the road, but it was definitely been a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, it sounds very exciting actually. You really went through some career shifts. Yet it all kind of still adds up together, and that's what I love about the story. And I think a lot of times we try to put people into these boxes, but if you kind of see it and from a legal to an HR, there's a really nice you can kind of see that transition as well, right? And now you're into that strategy, but that just comes with experience, I feel like, right? So
Right.
it's interesting. But I'm curious to go back, what made you choose to become a lawyer in the first place? Because I'm always curious, like what inspires people to kind of study one thing and then they finish their education and decide to do something completely different. But what
Yeah.
inspired you to go to law school to begin with?
No, great question. So I originally went to college to be an architecture major. I
Hmm.
was fascinated with building designs, the spatial relationships of, how you can build something and really have it tell a story. That didn't work out too well for me. So I lasted probably about a semester or two in that regard. And then I eventually transitioned into a business major. And it wasn't until in between my like sophomore and junior year, I happened to do like a stint at a law firm back in Michigan, where I'm from. And I was just really fascinated with the types of work that the partner was doing, one of the named partners was doing. And just, how you go about solving issues, how you go about, working with not only the judge, but there's this whole gamesmanship with the other side of the table, if you will, that I just found really fascinating. And so I was like, all right, cool. I could do something like this. I don't know if I wanted to be that type of lawyer, but I was going to be an agent, right? I
Hmm.
wanted to be a sports agent and do all that. And I thought that, it sounded good at the time. That didn't work out either. but but no, so that's how I got in. That's how the law school bug hit me, was really that sophomore, junior year of college. I really took, it was almost like an apprenticeship, if you will, that really got me interested in the practice. And I really wanted to do that full time.
Mm. Hey, you, thanks for watching. If you're enjoying this episode, make sure to share it with friends and family who might find it interesting. Make sure to hit the subscribe button as well to stay up to date on weekly new videos that are going to be coming out with some awesome guests that I bring on. And if you have any questions, use the comment section to ask me questions, to interact. I look forward to talking to you. You know what's interesting about that is that I very much relate to the part of like you kind of like you had all these different ideas of what you wanted to do, and I think it's so much better to just kind of try. And you're like, well, that didn't work out, but at least you've kind of tried certain aspects like of things that you wanted to try, and I think that's one of the
Yeah.
biggest things that people tend to like regret. So is like, oh, I should have done this, should have done this, and I always encourage like experiment, even if it doesn't work out the way you thought it was going to. At least you like, okay, well, I've done it, I've tried it, you know, and
Right.
sometimes you just have to go back to it, and maybe it's just sometimes it's just not for you, right? But
Yeah.
that's really important, I think,
Yeah.
especially for this audience, because a lot of people that kind of message me about the podcast and they're like, oh, this was really interesting, because if people feel like, oh, like I'm not alone in this, like it's normal to try things and then not kind
Yeah.
of follow through necessarily, you know, and just kind of take a different route. Why New York?
Great question. So when the market crashed in '08, and I graduated in '09, my father was actually living here at the time. And so it was almost like a soft enough landing to try and figure out, well, what am I going to do? And it was one of those things where, you hear the adages of, you can make it here, you can make it anywhere, right? In New York. And so I was like really drawn to the big city. And I was like,
Mm,
look, if nothing's happening here right now, I'm gonna try. Like, if I'm gonna go big or go home, right?
yeah.
And so let's go ahead. Let's go to New York. Let me figure it out. And if I figure out something here, if I can make it work, then boom, I got it, right? So I've
Mm,
always been. It's funny. I was just telling someone this earlier. The one, the biggest investment that I've never failed on is the investment in me.
mm,
And so I have been very intentional about, look, if I'm going to try something, I'll go
mm,
ahead and do it. Like I put that in myself to say like, hey, and I'm a naturally kind of driven person, but I'm going to go ahead and try to go for it. And so, there were a lot of folks, truthfully, probably nobody other than my parents really didn't think I was going to pass the New York bar because my law school career wasn't exactly stellar, right?
mm,
First year I struggled. And so when I came here and then did it, it was almost like you got little wins along the way. It's like those little steps. So I was like, okay, boom, that was a win. I got this. All right. I still
mm,
don't have a job, but I passed the bar. And so now what can you do? And so it was just staying at it. So New York was just it was the shiny object. And I had a nice, my dad was here at the time and it worked out well for me.
mm. Yeah, and it's interesting because most people would kind of go maybe the opposite way, right? Especially in the times of uncertainty, right? Like in like 2009, you know, like you
Yeah.
might want to stay around what's comfortable, but you went the other way. And you're like, let me challenge myself even more, and let me just go like do, you know, kind of go big or go home. Have
Yeah.
you always, and you kind of mentioned that you always were just kind of a person who could just kind of go on after it, but was there something in your childhood and your upbringing, or maybe just through your development years where kind of you know you start to recognize like, okay, you develop this personality, and what I'm trying to get at is I'm trying to figure out if certain things are just innate in
Yeah.
character versus are they actually, can they be nurtured and kind of built, and so I asked this question and I'm curious, how was your
Yeah.
experience?
Yeah, so for this, I gotta give, my parents a lot of credit in this. There was, I'm really close to both of my parents, but I would say that, in when I was coming up, elementary and middle school, those things, my mom always told me that there was nothing that I couldn't do. Like absolutely nothing. My dad, very similar. And it may seem very cliche to say stuff like that,
Mhm.
but like those types of things stick with you, right? And
Right.
it's like, if you're going to try and do something, yeah, you can do it, Brian. You got it, right? I believe
Mm,
in you, right? When I was doubting myself about certain things like, going to New York, going to the bar, here's my mom. Oh, you got it. Like just very nonchalant about it.
right.
And it was, and then, I look back at her and I'm like, yeah, you're absolutely right. I do have this, right?
Mm,
Because if I set my mind to something, I'm going to do it. Come hell or high
mm,
water, I'm going to get it done. And so I would say that, my parents really help nurture that. And they nurtured it, but yes, there is something in me as well where if I do put my mind to something, I'm I'm on it. Like I am
mm,
on it. Sometimes to a fault, but but I am on it, really trying to figure out what it is that I can do to either, whatever the goal is, right? Get the job, or learn a new thing, build a new skill, whatever the case may be. I'll try to get it done.
Mhm. And was there any kind of moments of doubt? And how did you, and because I'm sure there was, like, as much as people like go get it, I'm sure there's still there's moments when you're like, oh, was this the right decision? Was there anything that you did in your like day to day, like your routines or habits that kind of help you maintain that mindset? Because it's not easy to maintain that mindset, right? Even those that are like go-getters, like there's a
Yeah.
point when you're like, I don't know if I got this one, but then you keep
Yeah.
going. Like, is there something that you do that helps you to kind of continue with that?
Yeah, I would say, my biggest thing is about, and look, and I ebb and flow with this, but it's about being consistent, right?
Mm,
And in whatever it is that I'm doing. And sometimes, look, I've fallen off of that consistency for certain things. And to your question about doubt, did I ever doubt myself, like the decision coming to New York, that did I make a good? Oh yeah, absolutely.
mm,
Because you know, I was here for a while. I studied for the bar, I passed, but then I couldn't find anything,
mm,
and so I was like, damn, I took a gamble, right? I took a gamble
right.
on this. It is not panning out for me.
Mm,
What did I do wrong? What can I do? Whatnot.
mm,
And so I was really, really trying to make sure that I wasn't getting too down on myself. But I will say that what helped me was being consistent. And so let me, if you know, my just I'll expand a little bit on that. So what did that mean when I got to New York and I realized that I couldn't find a job? Well, there are all types of bar associations, meeting, networking events, all these things that were around. You need to start going, right? And when you're going, don't just go and try to have a good time because there's free drinks and there's free food and there may be folks that you want to talk to and party with. Go there with intention. And so what I would do is there'd be an event. Let's say, Elena, you're hosting an event. There's typically like a list or a brochure or something about what's going on.
mhm,
And because I knew some of the things that I wanted to do, I would circle who I would have to meet that night. I'd have to meet that person or make some connection where at least this is someone I need to speak with. And I would do that at every event, every single event. And I was at a New York State Bar Association event. My first kind of break, if you will, came when I was at this event, and I was trying to get truthfully anything, right? And I probably still have a stack of them somewhere, but all these rejection letters, right? And so I was talking to a woman, I was networking. It was a woman I'm sorry, a woman who could get me to this judge that I wanted to meet because I was interested in his chambers. And so I'm talking. I'm like, oh, I'm waiting to talk to him, and she stops like, oh, introducing whatnot, and I'm talking to her, and she listens to my story, and she's like, oh, well, what are you trying to do? I was like, look, I'll take an internship, whatever, a clerkship. I'm trying to find something. Oh, you should do X, Y, and Z.
mhm,
And I was like, okay, So I went and I introduced myself to him, and she was like, oh, and then now email this person, and then we'll try to get you in. Elena, within 2 weeks, I had a volunteer opportunity for the New York State Commercial Division court. And it was just, it was validating, if you will, right?
mhm,
Because I went there with intention to meet a few people. And, the other thing too is about building relationships. There are folks who genuinely want to help. This
mhm.
woman didn't know me at all. I was an unknown entity. Hell, that was probably some of the reasons why I couldn't find anything, is because nobody knew who I was and they didn't really care about the law school I went to, which is unfortunate because Wayne State's a very good school.
Mm,
And so when that happened, it opened the floodgates for me. I was able to then boom, I got that clerkship, if you will, and then, or I should say, internship. Then I
mhm,
got another internship working in the bankruptcy court. And it was good because I got a chance to, now I felt like I was a part of the scene, if you will. I was on the
mm.
legal circuit, I was volunteering. But then, it comes to a point where you can't volunteer forever, Brian,
Yeah,
because at some
you
point,
gotta pay
at
bills.
some point you got to pay some bills. And the funny stories, I got down to, it was like my last like 300 or so bucks, and I was like, ooh, what's going on here? And then, I had to make a couple calls, and I eventually landed a gig in Jersey. But
Mm,
it was all about, when I say the consistency and the intentionality of what I was doing led to some of these conversations happening. And
mhm.
it was like movement begets movement, right? So
Yeah.
those things were happening. I was volunteering, and it was almost like, okay, good. There's an aura about activity that's happening with me. Then boom, another job comes, and boom, then I get a temp.
Hmm.
And so then it all just starts to flow. So I'm very fortunate in some of the things that have happened. I don't think they haven't happened by just me sitting around. I'll tell you that.
Hmm.
But I've been very fortunate and blessed in how things have kind of unfolded for me in my career thus far.
Mm. What I appreciate so much about the story are a couple of things. Number one, for that lady who was just a connector, a natural connector. And
Oh
I
yeah.
think I think that networking has just gotten this bad rap that it's like all about, kind of asking and taking, and it's more about giving. It's more about those kind of individuals, because those individuals is what makes networking work.
Yes.
Like that's where it's at. It's the relationships. It's being able to it's connecting the dots, right? Like she talked to you and
Absolutely.
then she's like, oh, hey, X, Y, and Z.
Absolutely. And I gotta say, that point that you just made is so well taken, because there were a lot of networking events that I went to where you would get the feeling that, I would get the feeling that because I can't do anything for you, you're not going to help me out. And I
Mhm.
wasn't even coming, I wasn't asking for anything. I was getting to know all of these things. But like, there were certain organizations that I would, visit, and I would try to talk to the folks there. And, people were all like, oh, yeah, connect and reach out and do this. And then you'd reach out just for genuine, get to knows and meet and greets, and you'd get ghosted. And
Mhm.
you're like, all right, well, this is BS, right? And so for her, what I appreciated so much about her, and I remember I had a chance to like reconnect with her a few years ago, to tell her that, she's the reason I'm still here. Like, I'm still in
Mhm.
New York. And I say that because it was almost like I didn't have to I didn't have to prove anything to her. I, she knew what I was, like, we talked. She knew what I was looking for, what I was interested in. And she was automatically just like, here's what you should do. Boom,
Mhm.
boom, boom. She didn't ask about pedigree. She didn't, where I went to school. It didn't matter. I was
Yeah.
willing to do the work. I was, I guess, conversational, right? So she appreciated the discussion. And then she put me in touch with somebody who could give me an opportunity. I mean, that's that I strive to be like how she was, because
Mm.
I'll never forget that, ever.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that if more people showed up to these events with that mentality, what can I give, maybe, right? Like, and I think two things. One, being curious, like curious just to get information, to meet people, right? Not with any
Yeah,
expectation, but just kind of like what you, another thing I appreciate about this is that you did your homework and you're like, okay, I know who's coming. You were curious enough instead of, and kind of having a plan and intention, like, okay, I want to talk to these people. I want to get more information, etc. I'm interested in what they're doing and their and the work, like with the judge, right? And so
right.
one is being curious, and then two is like going in with the intention of like, what can I possibly give to somebody, even if you feel like what can I possibly give to somebody, but go with that intent, just that mindset that like I'm there to maybe be able to offer some, like what she did, maybe to offer some connections, etc. And I think what it does is releases the pressure from yourself to be nervous because you're not there asking for anything. I say you're not
Right.
there with any expectation, you're just there to have a conversation, to be curious, maybe offer somebody something. You never know where you can, add value, right? Like us as individuals, everybody has something to add. And I
Mm-hmm.
think we're to just maybe shift our mindset in that way. I think networking will be a lot more beneficial for a lot more people overall. So,
I agree. I agree. And
mm-hmm.
there are, I think, more and more, especially now that networking has had to go really virtual, right?
Mm-hmm.
And or at least over the past couple of years, I mean, things are coming back in person now, but for the most part, it's been virtual these past few years. You can really be intentional about kind of sifting through some of those things, like finding the types of people that you want to connect with. and
Hmm.
hopefully reaching out to them and them responding on a LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever the case may be, and really building those types of connections. Lunch club is another good one. You know, like I did
Yeah.
a couple of those and have had great conversations, because then you can really, like, who are you looking to speak with, right?
Hmm.
And then if you're like a match, if you will, then you go and you have the conversation.
Hmm.
Those things are have been great.
Yeah, and a final point, because you mentioned so many good things about that story that you said, but the final point I want to mention, and then we'll move on, is the aspect of that action creates that energy for more action. And my audience knows I preach it all the time. I'm always like, I think people are just annoyed with me at this point about how much I talk about, like, I don't care what you do, volunteer, give your time, weekend projects, internships. I don't care at what age you are, if you're looking, what, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm like, action will always drive something, it will
Yeah,
always add some kind of value, always. And you have to be willing to do that. You have to remove the ego and remove, understandably, people need to pay bills, but if the only option you have right now, doing a volunteer or internship versus not
yep,
doing anything,
yep.
right?
Go volunteer.
Go volunteer. And like, it really, I'm such a believer, it really creates that energy to and those actions, and there's something to it. I don't know what it is, but if there was a magic formula, it's just taking any action, no matter how
Mm-hmm.
insignificant it might seem at that time, or significant. It's, I think it's just, it really, so I really appreciate you're saying that,
Of
because
course,
it's the reality, and I very much believe that.
of course.
So let's bring it back to what you're doing today. So I'm very
Yeah.
curious about a couple of things. I want to talk a little bit about your podcast, because you started this recently, and tell me a little bit more about what inspired. So it's called Why I Left. What
Yep.
inspired that? Because I think it's interesting to the audience. And what has been like your biggest themes that you have found, maybe from talking with individuals on your podcast?
No, absolutely. And so why I left really originated from, so as I mentioned earlier, I have a background in kind of this employment attorney space, HR space. And what I started to notice late, yeah, mid to late last year is, people, you see the reports of people leaving their jobs, and all of these things were happening, if you will, right? And so I just got intrigued just reading about it. And so
Mm-hmm.
then it kept coming back. But like when you read these articles, let's say you were one of the folks, it would say, oh, so X amount of stats, folks are leaving. And then it'd have a quote from you. And I would really just, just be left feeling empty. Like I want to know more. Like, oh, she's got more of a story to tell. And so this kept happening over and over again. December, January, kept really happening. And then finally, in January, I just like I couldn't sleep one night. And I don't know if it was something I read or whatever the case may be, but I couldn't sleep. And I just had this idea just came to me. Right. I was like, well, you know what? What if these people wanted to tell their story more than just an article? Because these
Mm-hmm.
articles are snippets and they're, mixed with, how the flow goes. An issue's happening, maybe give a couple stats, maybe give a couple quotes. Here's a person that we talked to, one or two lines. Here's what you could do at the end, right? And so I was like, well, what if these people wanted to tell their story, like a bit more broadly, like a show about them? Because the show, truthfully, is not about me at all. And so this idea came to me 3 a.m. one night, and I couldn't put it down.
Mm-hmm.
And I take notes on my phones. If ever I have ideas, I just kind of write it out. And I was like, oh, okay, cool, why I left. And I put that as, oh, that'd be nice. And I put it down and I couldn't go to sleep. And I wrote out the intro like in the span of like a couple hours. And so I was like, oh, wait a minute, what is going on here? I'm really intrigued by this. And so I ran it by a couple folks. I was like, do you think I have something here? Like, what if this was a show? Like, do you think people would want to do it? Like, oh yeah, some folks were like, yeah, you should try it out. And so I really spent a lot of time. So it's about that. It's about why people left their job during the pandemic. And then what I did was just really, really plan out. And then I had to get people, right? So do people, would they believe in this vision from this random guy who's reaching out to them on LinkedIn? Because a lot of the stuff I reached out to folks on LinkedIn. And so people did. And look, I got ghosted a lot. Don't get me wrong. I felt like a salesperson. I wasn't selling anything, but I was selling a vision of come tell your story on this show. I know you don't know who I am, but let's do this. And I had people who were really excited to share their stories. And it's been wonderful. We're recording this now. Like I'm about 5 or 6 episodes in, but you asked about some of the themes. One of the biggest themes that we've been discussing is around the importance of taking care of your mental health.
Mm.
And that's come up more often than, I mean, I knew it was going to happen, but I didn't expect to get some of the responses that I've gotten from others who have watched the episodes about what's happening. So I think, the importance of investing in yourself. I had mentioned that about myself earlier, but really focusing on what you like to do. The pandemic gave a lot of these people an opportunity to say, hey, things are different. I'm either working remotely now, or hell, maybe I'm not working at all. What can I do differently now than I was doing before? And you're hearing people go and do it. And so that's what I love about it. It is, yes, it's a show that originated with, a little bit of a theme around, leaving, during the Great Resignation, leaving their job during that time. But it's really also a story, or, an amount of stories and number of
Mm.
stories about triumph, about self actualization. It's about, yes, doubt, fear, and those types of things, but it's also about confidence. I can do this. Oh, wait a minute. There is a different way. Oh, wait a minute. I'm not turning back. And
Mm.
so I loved hearing, and I'm loving hearing all the stories that we've been able to bring on. We've got, folks who started in the wellness industry, folks who just graduated, nurses, real estate folks, coaches, executives. I mean, we got a slew of, I got 20 episodes in the bank, right? And so I have content through
Mm.
February of 23, which is awesome because, it's shown that, and I set a goal of 20. So remember earlier, I was like,
Yeah.
I set my mind to something, I'm going to do it. I was like, I wanted 20 interviews for my first season, and I got it, right? And I
Yeah.
got it. I'm very happy about that. But those are some of the themes, right? And I
Mm.
think it's just it is great to see and hear. And some of the feedback I've gotten, even from some of the guests, is around, well, you know what? This was actually good for me. And I didn't anticipate that. And I was like,
Mm.
I've asked some of them, why? They're like, you kind of going through so much during this time. You don't take a step back. Like you actually forced me to take a step back and really think about why I did what I did. And, I go through this whole, we do an intro call and I have them think about the questions and all that.
Yeah.
And it allowed them to be very thoughtful about, like, wow, this is what I did. And yeah, I did that,
Yeah.
and so that a lot of them have found it very kind of therapeutic in a way to share their story, and hopefully that'll impact some other folks. And
Mm.
that's awesome. I'm very just thankful to be in a position to kind of facilitate those stories. But
Mm.
it's been great. It's been great for me to one, meet all these new people as well, but then to get
Yeah.
their stories out there for the world.
Well, I think it's just so relatable, right? I mean, with all that, it's just I think it just any change, going through change, it's just so relatable. So I think, so really I mean, and why I left, I love the title, by the way.
Oh,
I
thank
love
you.
it. I
Thank
love
you.
the theme of it. I love the title. It's great. And you know what I find interesting as well is that when you were talking, like there was fear, there's courage, there's so many different emotions that one goes through when you are leaving a job. And even if you've been there for just a year or maybe many years, change is
Yeah.
scary in general. And I remember when I left in 2019 from my full-time job at that time in Dubai, and I didn't sleep for like weeks before like my last day. Looking back at it now, that was the easiest thing I did. The easiest part of jumping into entrepreneurship and independent kind of work was the quitting of the actual job. And
Mm.
that's what, and it's like that's, it seems like such a scary thing, but looking back, and it was because I was just so like indulged in like, oh my God, this is so scary. And actually that was the easiest part. The hard part
Mm.
comes after. And I think and although it is, all of it is kind of scary, but I think it's interesting when you hear people's stories and like, yeah, it was scary, but I overcame it and this is what happened. And then you kind of, like you said, they reflect back, and it almost like there's so many funny moments that I'm sure people look back on. And then
Yeah,
a biggest part of what that builds is that confidence. And that's what I love about that
absolutely.
your podcast, is because it talks about all of that. And I think that is one of the biggest challenges and obstacles people have with themselves, is either, the fear, which is so real, right?
Hmm.
And then just giving yourself a little bit of benefit of a doubt and courage to say like you can make it, like, and like, what's the worst that will happen, right? Like I always ask
Right.
people, like, just think like, what's the worst that will happen, but yeah, and I think listening to people's stories is always powerful. So
Absolutely. And what's been great too, I'd always like to close the shows with some advice.
mm,
And it's been, we talk about, gems, to hear it from them, the advice that they would share to other folks and to other employers potentially. It's just like, thank you. I'm glad that they're able to get that information out there because people need to hear it,
mm.
and so I've been, like I said, I'm just very fortunate to be able to get this information out. And yeah, people are liking it. So I appreciate you asking about
Absolutely. And so I want to also ask you, in a world where we're so continuously on and on, you seem to be a person who's doing a lot of different things, right?
it. Oh yeah.
So and I give kudos to, because I mean, again, I love your background in terms of where you came from your career perspective, and just like the hustle that's in you is like very innate, and it's, you do all of it with, it seems like, with such ease, right? And I guess a big part of it, I would assume, is because you enjoy all that you do. But how do you manage that? How do you manage all these different functions? Like, you're the chief of staff, right? You have your podcasting, you have your kind of other things that you're doing. And how do you manage all of that? Do you have like a routine that you stick to? Like, what helps you get all this done
Yeah,
with
no, it's
quality?
I know it's a great question, and people often ask that. Yeah, because sometimes, look, I think, like, where do I find the time to do this? What I would say is that, again, going back to, if I am intent on doing something, I'm going to find a way, right?
Mm,
And what I mean by that is, look, there are, with the show, I mean, my day-to-day role is a highly visible role, and I do a lot, during the day normally. But then I also have a family, right? And
mhm,
so, I have a couple kids, right? And so, I always want to make sure I'm spending time with them too. But I also have to remember, like, there are, and this, I'm I know the backlash against hustle culture, and I get that. Don't get me wrong, but I get some of my best work done when people are sleeping. Right.
yeah.
And so, and I know that at times may not be the healthiest, but I've put things in place where I try to set myself up for success. So I'm one of those, 5 a.m. workout folks. Like, I'm one of those
Mhm.
folks. So I get in, and I need that burst of energy, that release, to kind of make sure I'm set for the day. And then I go about, most of the days are pretty similar in that, I'm, I may take the kids, may not. A lot of that falls on my wife. But when I'm at work, I'm here, right? I'm there. I'm getting what I need to get done. Focusing on the things I need to focus on. Yeah, certain things that pop up on the side come up. I can answer it quickly, but I'm really kind of focused day to day on what I need to do for my day to day role, right? And then at when I get home, there's a certain amount of time, like 6 to maybe 9, 6 to 10, depending on, the kids, if they want to be good and go to sleep early, we'll see, right? But that's like some dedicated family time, right?
Mhm.
And so I hang out with them. Yes, certain things may come up, I may have to answer, of course. And then hopefully, the kids go to sleep, maybe watch a movie, my wife and I hang out, whatever the case may be, but then there's a certain time where people start winding down. And
Mhm.
so, and now granted, this may not be the healthiest, but from like 11 p.m. to 3 a.m., that's game time. That's game time for me, and I know that sounds absolutely crazy, but that's at times what it is for me. And then
Mhm.
I will I'll, and look, and I don't do this every night, right? So I don't want to make it seem like I'm
Right.
some, crazy warrior like that. But there are times if I know I'm ready, like I need to get out some episodes. Okay, perfect. 11 to 3, I can do this a couple times a week. I'll knock that out
Mm-hmm.
and I'll just do it. And so there's a sense of, or there is this sense of just, I have to be organized in a way because the nature of my, full-time job requires it. Like I need to be on, right? I need to be ready. I need to know about things that are happening at an organizational level to make sure I'm keeping the folks who need to be informed, right? Whether I'm
Mm-hmm.
researching, whatever the case may be. So I want to make sure I'm doing that. So I'm just hyper organized in that regard. And
Mm-hmm.
then again, it's about being intentional. I want to spend some time with family, so I'll put the phone in the room, playing with the kids, dancing around, doing all types of things. But then when it's time to like do other work, like passion project stuff, I'm in it. I know what I
Yeah.
need to do. I have my little notebook here or my OneNote, whatever the case may be, and it's like, here's what I need to do tonight. The
Mm-hmm.
other thing I'll mention is that, and sometimes we can kind of run into this issue is we try to do too much. We try to do so much at one time. I'm okay with just like chunking things out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like, yesterday was, okay, I need to plan for the episode 7 launch. Here's what I need to do. Once I got that done, okay, good. I'm good to go.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to do, no one's telling me that I have to post every day or do all that other than the algorithm, which that's a whole nother conversation, right? But but I'm planning that stuff out and then I'm good to go.
Yeah.
After that, it kind of is what it is. But it's about being organized and it's about being intentional what I'm trying to do. And really, I like small victories. I need small wins. And that's, you kind of know yourself. What do
Mm-hmm.
I need to do today? I get that done. That's a win for today. And that keeps me
Mm.
going.
And I'm with you on the whole like kind of there's this negative notion about the hustle culture, but I think there's a big difference between doing things at the rate that you're doing because you enjoy them versus doing things for other reasons. So, and I think it's important to distinguish because when you're doing something you enjoy, you get energy from it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
although yes, sure, we're human and we need sleep and all that, and that's fair, but that's where the balance comes in, right? That's where you kind of, and it sounds like that's what you're kind of making. It's just essentially just kind of balancing out, right? But I believe, like, listen, if you're enjoying something, by all means, like, there's nothing wrong with working. Like, go for it, like, work,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it gives you energy and it gives you purpose. And there's so many good chemicals that are released in your body when you're doing these sort of things and that state of flow and all of that. And at the same time, it's something that you're creating. And I mean, there's just so many
Yes.
benefits to that, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's and I think that's what people try. There's a lot of like, well, top things you can do to be productive, X, Y, and Z. I don't think there's any magic formulas. I think you just need to figure out what's good for you, right? And
Mm-hmm.
like certain things, and that's why I always ask people about this is like, what are your routines? What are your habits? And it's all over the place. Like it's just do what works for you. And so to some people, 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. might sound crazy. To others, it's like, well, that makes sense. That's a quiet time. Like, it
Right.
is. It's the
Yeah.
only time you can be at peace. I'm a morning or early morning person, like 4:35 a.m. And I love it because it's peace. I get more
Mm-hmm.
done in that 2 3 hour window than I do for the rest of the day.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's where it's at. So, but again, some people are night owls, some people are morning people. But again, big difference between doing something you truly enjoy versus doing something that drains you.
Yeah.
And I,
And,
yeah.
and you mentioned something too that and very similar to, with your show here. I mean, you created this show, right? There's a different level of connection when you actually, you have an idea and you turn it into action
Mm,
and you create this thing. And so for me, I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of energy that's associated with it. One, because it's kind of like your baby, right? And
right.
you've created it, you've brought it to light. I've had a ton of ideas as you could imagine. I've probably had a million and one ideas. None of them ever get off the ground, right? Or I don't stick with them or whatever the case may be. But this one was one I've stuck with.
Mm,
And so it's been great to see it. But then I'll admit it's also great to hear that it's actually impacting other people.
right.
Like I released an episode 2 weeks ago that really, dove deep into some mental health issues. I had a nurse from England who really talked openly and honestly about his struggles.
Mm,
And let me tell you, I got so much thank you for putting this information out in this space. Thank you for using your all these things. And I knew it was a powerful episode when I recorded it, but you never knew like how people are going to respond to it. I appreciated his openness. But to hear folks say, I needed to hear that, or this really touched me. I had another episode where folks were like, oh, I was in a down place. I needed to hear that right now. I, I didn't, I didn't expect that. I
Hmm.
didn't expect that at all. But things like that keep you going.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's rewarding to say the least. Not only
Absolutely.
it gives,
Yeah.
but it is super rewarding.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I very much appreciate it. And I'm definitely going to share it in the description so people can follow you. But share a little bit more about where do you usually hang out online? Where can people find your podcast?
Yeah.
Where can they connect with you? Or if somebody wants to be a guest, perhaps they've got a great story about why they left, where they can talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on LinkedIn by my name. So Brian Aquart, BrianAquart. You could also find and follow Why I Left, which is whyileft.co. That's WHYILEFT.co. And from there, all the platforms are I have available. I'm on Instagram, I'm on YouTube, Twitter, which I struggle with Twitter. I'll be honest, but LinkedIn has been really a success for me. So yeah, definitely follow the show. You can visit the website, and you can find all the social platforms. YouTube has been really great. So what's great about this, and I love this about your show too, is that it's some people like to listen, some people like to
Yeah.
watch, and so we're giving them both, Elena. We're giving them
Yeah,
both. So you can
absolutely.
watch and listen. Apple, Spotify, all the other places, but you can also watch on YouTube.
Awesome. Well, listen, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your story, sharing your career story. I think it's super relevant and interesting, and kudos to you really for all that you do and doing it with such passion.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and thank you for having me on.